By 1974, Mel Brooks was broke, exhausted, and ready to quit on films completely. The world of comedy, once his playground, was slipping through his fingers after he suffered the embarrassing flop of The 12 Chairs. That movie, his sequel to The Producers, had lost its audience, and with a new baby at home, he was desperate, not knowing how he would keep putting food on the table for his family. His wife, actress Anne Bancroft, was climbing steadily in her own career, but Brooks himself saw the well of possibility drying up. He later admitted that he was full of fear and doubt then. He didn't have a car or savings or a baby to support. Then, just when it seemed his Hollywood venture was about to fall apart, a strange script appeared on his desk. On initial inspection, it appeared less like a lifeline and more like a trap, a crazy satire involving a black sheriff station to guard an all-white western town. The project had been rejected by each of the other directors who had considered it. The racial content was too raw, the dialogue too graphic, and the concept of ridiculing sacred Hollywood convention too daring for the early 1970s studios. But what Brooks did with it would not only save his career from the edge, but trigger one of the most tumultuous and contentious productions in Hollywood history. Behind the guffaws, the production of Blazing Saddles would be attended by catastrophes, betrayals, lawsuits, and tragedies that still shadow its legacy today. The concept did not even originate with Brooks. It began in 1971 with a 26-year-old author named Andrew Bergman. Bergman, a nobody at the time, had penned a novella called Tex X, a satire novel about a black sheriff whose name was based on Malcolm X. His aim was not exactly subtle. He set out to demolish the whitewashed fantasies of Hollywood westerns by putting a black man not as psychic or punchline, but at the very pinnacle of power within the Old West. Warner Brothers purchased the script, but within moments, executives were in a state of panic. The tale was bold, pointed, and replete with calculated provocation. When racial tensions in America were still high, they could hardly envision releasing a movie with direct racial language, much less humor that destroyed one of Hollywood's favorite genres. James Earl Jones was considered for the lead, and Alan Arkin was briefly attached to direct. Jones, still not the voice of Darth Vader, but already a seasoned actor, would have lent seriousness and gravity to the part. But the production fell apart under its own excesses. The executives grew too apprehensive, the concept too ambitious for a mainstream release. The script was shelved quietly, collecting dust as a project too risk-prone to attempt. By 1972, Mel Brooks was asked to attempt it. He did not take the job out of pride. Afterwards, he confessed candidly that he did it out of desperation. He needed the paycheck, and at the time his career had limited other options. But instead of diluting Bergman's initial vision, Brooks doubled down on it. He brought in more writers, Norman Steinberg, Alan Ugger, and the iconic Richard Pryor, to develop and reimagine the screenplay into something still more outlandish than the studio had dreaded. Their initial draft swelled to an astonishing 412 pages, which would have equated to a whopping 8 hours of screen time. It was a madhouse collaboration, but Brooks relished the madness. He even put up a sign in the writer's room that read, "Do not write a courteous script," and no one did. Pryor brought raw jokes about Jewish people, and the Jewish writers brought raw jokes about black folks. No one respected their lane. The writing sessions were screaming arguments fueled by Chinese takeout and bottomless coffee, nights that lasted until mornings until the pages had accumulated. What emerged from the process was still big, boisterous, and completely fearless. The outcome was a script never before seen by the industry. But the lunacy of the writing room would be dwarfed by the hell of casting. Brooks' initial desire for Sheriff Bart was Pryor himself. Pryor had played a crucial role in establishing the voice of the movie, and his refusal to excise the raw racial words had served to maintain its integrity. But Warner Brothers hesitated. Pryor had just been arrested on charges of drug possession, and the studio ruled him uninsurable. They were not going to take the gamble. Brooks, enraged at being interfered with, thought about abandoning the project entirely. But Pryor himself talked him out of it. Calmly, he told Brooks, "We'll find the right guy. Keep going." The right Guy turned out to be Cleavon Little, a smooth and charismatic actor who brought both dignity and sly humor to the role. Although Pryor's non-appearance remains one of the all-time Hollywood what-ifs, particularly considering 2 years later he and Gene Wilder would become an iconic comedy team, Little's work became the film's core. His dry looks, delivery, and calm authority propelled the movie in a manner even fewer could have anticipated. If it was a challenge to cast the sheriff, discovering the Waco Kid was on the brink of disaster. Brooks first solicited John Wayne, the Western King. Wayne had read the script, laughed until it hurt, but told Brooks the script was too filthy for his carefully constructed image. He wished him well and vowed to be in line at the theater first, but he refused. Brooks then solicited Dan Dailey, a seasoned musical star who possessed the horsemanship ability the role demanded. But Daly's eyesight was fading, and he was almost blind, so he had to withdraw. Finally, Brooks cast Gig Young, a veteran Oscar-winning actor. But Young was alcoholic, and on his first day on the set, catastrophe occurred. On the jail cell set, Young started shaking uncontrollably and vomiting green bile. Brooks initially believed that it was a stunt, and only later discovered that Young was undergoing alcohol withdrawal. He was hospitalized and never made it back to the production. He also sued Warner Brothers for breach of contract, which added some legal heat to the production. Years later, his life took a darker turn. Young killed his wife in 1978 and then took his own life, leaving his short and catastrophic Blazing Saddles stint as a chilling footnote to Hollywood tragedy. Desperate, Brooks turned once more to Gene Wilder. Wilder had previously turned down the villain role, but agreed to rethink it after Brooks telephoned in a panic. He fittingly donned the Waco Kid's attire, and something snapped into place. His laconic, eccentric energy gave exactly the counterpoint required to Cleavon Little's assurance. Together, they created a chemistry that grounded the film, taking what had been a production bogged down in disaster and turning it into one driven by genius. But still, the chaos didn't cease. After the film was finished and shown to Warner Brothers executives, the reaction was abysmal. They sat stone-faced in front of fart gags, racial epithets, and even a man punching a horse. No one laughed. When the lights went up, executives were apoplectic. Leo Greenfield, the distribution chief, bluntly declared that the film was to be buried and written off. Others handed Brooks a list of suggestions. Eliminate the campfire scene, tone down the racial language, cut the violence. Brooks nodded, took the list graciously, then departed the room and balled it up. He wasn't going to alter a thing. Instead, he bet on another screening, this one for secretaries, janitors, and mailroom staff. Beginning in the opening minutes, the room erupted in laughter. Audiences gasped for air, collapsed out of their chairs, and screamed at the screen. Brooks muttered to himself, "This is our movie." Executives did not have any choice but to rethink. Even so, Warner Brothers covered its bets. In February of 1974, the film opened in only 3 cities, New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, with no promotion and no critic previews. To their amazement, crowds filled the theaters, and word of mouth spread like fire. By spring, the movie was released everywhere, including in suburban theaters where Warner Brothers had predicted it would fail. Rather, it was selling out every night. Critics were mixed, some labeling it vulgar, others genius, but nobody cared. At the end of 1974, Blazing Saddles had made $119.6 million on a $2.6 million budget and was the #1 movie of the year. Inflated for inflation, its box office haul would be near $600 million today, a mind-boggling amount. What executives had almost killed became a sensation. The movie had subtext and intrigue hidden beneath. Brooks populated the soundtrack with his own voices, singing, heckling, even background harmonies, and inserted personal asides, including a cameo from Anne Bancroft as a church lady. But the irreverence also spurred lawsuits. Actress Hedy Lamarr sued Warner Brothers for $10 million upon discovering Harvey Korman's villain was named Hedley Lamarr. Brooks even satirized the lawsuit in the script itself. The case was ultimately settled discreetly. The production also had the specter of Gig Young's senseless doom hanging over it. Even in the midst of comedy, reminders of Hollywood's darker aspects persisted. For Warner Brothers, success with the film resulted in efforts to cash in further. In 1975, CBS broadcast a half-hour pilot called Black Bart, with Lou Gossett Jr. as Bart. Without the coarse language and shock humor, the translation did not work. It was only broadcast once before being put on the shelf. Years later, an online urban legend purported that Warner Brothers secretly filmed several seasons to keep sequel rights, but the rumor was subsequently debunked as a hoax. In reality, Black Bart only was one episode, an odd sidebar to the tradition of Blazing Saddles. The movie came to be accepted in time as one of the greatest comedies ever produced. The American Film Institute ranked it 6th on its list of the 100 funniest movies in 2000, and the Library of Congress added it to the National Film Registry in 2006. But the controversy never really went away. In 2024, when HBO Max released the film, it preceded it with a 3-minute introduction by scholar Jacqueline Stewart, which explained the racial intent and language, which caused controversy all over again. Some felt that context was needed, others that it blunted the rawness of the comedy. Years before, Brooks had even forecast this. In 2017, he declared political correctness the killer of comedy, claiming that Blazing Saddles simply could never be produced today. He wasn't making the case for cruelty, only that comedy has to be willing to take risks and make people uncomfortable in order to uncover hypocrisy. Without risk, he felt, art has no bite. The laughter covered up the shadows. Gig Young's tragic death, the lawsuits, the aborted spin-off, all reminders that comedy springs from chaos. But Blazing Saddles survived not just because it was funny, but because it compelled audiences to confront their discomfort. Half scandal, half work of genius, it's one of the oddest Hollywood tales ever told. 30 years later, it's still a mystery. If the movie were released today, would it survive the backlash, or would it be put underground before audiences ever got a chance to see it?